The year was 1961. It was the heart of the Cold War. The United States was now under the leadership of newly inaugurated President John F. Kennedy. Ham the Chimp became the first ape in space. Freedom riders challenged segregation. The Berlin Wall rose, dividing East from West Germany, and Disney's 101 Dalmatians landed in cinemas. But in the midst of these monumental events, the Soviets were plotting something big. The Soviet Union had initiated a nationwide selection process to find suitable candidates for their space program. The Soviets put out a request for people who met their age, height, and weight criteria. Those who had met this criteria would be sent to the Central Military Scientific Aviation Hospital in Moscow, who would conduct medical evaluations on 154 candidates in groups of 20. While the full details of these tests were not publicly disclosed, the medical tests would typically include thorough physical examination, cardiovascular tests, neurological evaluations, and psychological assessments. These tests were all to ensure the candidates were not only physically fit, but mentally capable of handling the stress that comes with space travel. After these tests, they had narrowed it down to 20 pilots from the Soviet Air Force. Ivan N. Enakayev, Pavel I. Belayev, Valentin V. Bondarenko, Valery F. Bukovsky, Valentin I. Filatyev, Viktor V. Gobatko, Anatoly Y. Karashov, Yevgeny V. Kronov, Yuri A. Gagarin, Vladimir M. Komarov, Alexei A. Leonov, Grigory G. Nelyubov, Andrian G. Nikolayev, Pavel R. Popovich, Mars Z. Rafikov, Georgy S. Shonin, German S. Titov, Valentin Valarmov, Boris V. Volanov, and Dmitry A. Zekin. These 20 candidates were then sent for training in a new cosmonaut center, which would later be renamed Star City. They would be subjected to much more physically and mentally demanding tests. The top performers of these tests were then narrowed down into an elite group of 6, also known as the Vanguard 6, consisting of Bukovsky, Gagarin, Nelyubov, Nikolayev, Popovich, and Titov, who would become the first cosmonauts of the Vostok program. I also want to add that out of the 20 original candidates, when asked to anonymously vote for who they'd like to see fly first, all but 3 had chosen Gagarin, which I think is a pretty cool little detail. Gagarin was also officially nominated by General Nikolai Kamanin, head of the cosmonaut team, with the words, "I find in him an analytical mind and rare industriousness. We need profound information about outer space, and I have no doubt Gagarin will bring it." And so, the Soviets had found who they were looking for. The selection, which comes at no surprise, was Yuri Alexeyevich Gagarin. Yuri was born on the 9th of March 1934 in the village of Klushino, in the Russian Soviet Federative Social Republic, or RSFSR. As a young man, Yuri worked as a foundryman at a steel plant in Lubetsy. In 1955, Yuri joined the Soviet Air Force, which was a big step up from his previous job as a foundryman. After graduation, he was assigned to Lul-Stary Air Base in Murmansk Oblast. Yuri was chosen for his quick learning skills, sharp attention to his surroundings, and his perseverance. Also for the fact that he was short, standing at 1.57 meters or 5'2", which would allow him to easily fit inside the small round capsule of the Vostok 1. At 5:30 in the morning on April 12, 1961, Yuri was helped into his spacesuit. Sensors were attached to his body to monitor his physical condition during the flight, orange overalls to help with spotting upon landing, and finally, boots, gloves, and the helmet. After a short travel to the Baikonur Space Center, at the foot of the launch platform, Yuri would give a speech addressed to people of all countries and continents.
Дорогие друзья, близкие и незнакомые, соотечественники, люди всех стран и континентов, через несколько минут могучий космический корабль унесет меня в далекие просторы Вселенной. Что можно сказать вам в эти последние минуты перед стартом? Вся моя жизнь кажется мне сейчас одним прекрасным мгновением. Все, что прожито, что сделано прежде, было прожито и сделано ради этой минуты. Сами понимаете, трудно разобраться в чувствах сейчас, когда очень близко подошел час испытания, к которому мы готовились долго и страстно. Вряд ли стоит говорить о тех чувствах, которые я испытал, когда мне предложили совершить этот первый в истории полет. Радость? Нет, это была не только радость. Гордость? Нет, это была не только гордость. Я испытал большое счастье быть первым в космосе, вступить один на один в небывалый поединок с природой. Можно ли мечтать о большем? Но вслед за этим я подумал о той колоссальной ответственности, которая легла на меня, первым совершить то, о чем мечтали поколения людей, первым проложить дорогу человечеству в космос. Назовите мне большую по сложности задачу, чем та, что выпала мне. Это ответственность не перед одним, не перед десятком людей, не перед коллективом. Это ответственность перед всем советским народом, перед всем человечеством, перед его настоящим и будущим. И если, тем не менее, я решаюсь на этот полет, то только потому, что я коммунист, что имею за спиной образцы беспримерного героизма моих соотечественников, советских людей. Я знаю, что соберу всю свою волю для наилучшего выполнения задания. Понимая ответственность задачи, я сделаю все, что в моих силах для выполнения задания коммунистической партии и советского народа. Сейчас до старта остаются считанные минуты. Я говорю вам, дорогие друзья, до свидания.
Yuri would then be helped into the capsule of the Vostok 1. The Vostok 1 consisted of two main sections. The first was a nearly spherical descent module and was just 2.3 meters in diameter, which housed the cosmonaut, instruments, and escape system. The module was covered in an ablative material to protect it from the heat generated during re-entry. The second part of the spacecraft was a biconical instrument module, which contained propellant and the engine system. Inside the descent module, there was an ejection seat for the cosmonaut, which could be used during launch aborts and for landing on the Earth. The spacecraft had two windows, one above the cosmonaut's head on the entry hatch and one at his feet, equipped with an optical device for orientation of the spacecraft. There were also external radio antennas for communication. The spacecraft carried 13 days provisions to allow for survival and natural orbital decay in the event that the retro rockets failed. A focus was made on food that would not form crumbs, as Gagarin was provided with beef, liver paste, and chocolate sauce packed in metal toothpaste-style tubes. The overall design of the capsule was based on the Zenit Spy Satellite project, which were a series of military photo reconnaissance satellites launched by the Soviet Union between 1961 and 1994. These satellites were designed to capture high-resolution images of specific areas of interest. The capsule was launched atop of the Vostok K-8K-72K rocket, which was adapted from the existing R-7 Semyorka Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, or ICBM. The R-7 was the world's first ICBM, and its design and engineering principles were applied to the development of the Vostok 1 spacecraft. At 9:07 AM, the Vostok 1 took off from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Yuri exclaimed his iconic catchphrase of "Poyekali," or "Let's go." The Vostok 1 reached a maximum altitude of 301 kilometers. This was a higher altitude than they were expecting, and if the Vostok 1's brake system had malfunctioned, Gagarin would have had to wait for the spacecraft to begin descending on its own. Lucky for him, the brakes did work. Upon reaching this altitude, Yuri was awestruck by the view through the capsule's window, commenting on our planet's beautiful aura. The flight had lasted for 108 minutes, and in this time, Gagarin had made a single orbit around Earth, traveling at the speed of 29,000 kilometers per hour and skimming the upper atmosphere at 169 kilometers at its lowest point. He traveled over Siberia, Japan, Cape Horn, then back towards Africa. After Gagarin had completed a full orbit of the Earth, he began his descent back into our atmosphere. This would be where a major problem would present itself. The capsule began to violently shake as Gagarin re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. The descent module and service module were supposed to separate fully before re-entry. This was crucial because only the descent module was designed to withstand the heat of re-entry. However, the cables that connected the descent module and the service module did not separate properly. This improper separation caused the two modules to remain connected as they began re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. This was a dangerous situation because it could have led to the descent module entering the atmosphere at the wrong angle. Fortunately, the cables burned up as the spacecraft re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, and the descent module was able to fully separate from the service module. In doing this, through the portholes, Gagarin was able to witness the terrifying display of the craft's exterior being heated to thousands of degrees as the protective coating burned away. When the capsule was about 7 kilometers above the Earth, Gagarin ejected, leaving the capsule to land on its own. It's worth noting that Gagarin's ejection and parachute landing were kept secret for many years, because the flight wouldn't have been recognized for various records according to the international rules of the time. These rules stipulated that the pilot must land with the spacecraft, and once it was clear that the parachute descent was part of nominal landing profile, the rules were then modified to permit it. The Vostok 1 had missed the intended landing site, and when Gagarin ejected from the capsule, he saw that, instead of dry land, beneath him was the river Volga. Fortunately, he was able to steer the parachute away from the water and land on the ground. After landing, Gagarin was approached by a local farmer and her granddaughter. They were initially frightened by Gagarin's spacesuit and parachute dragging him across the ground. The farmer stepped towards him and asked, "Have you come from outer space?" To which Gagarin replied, "Yes, would you believe it? I certainly have." Noticing that the girl was still on edge, Gagarin hastily added, "Don't be alarmed, I'm Soviet." Yuri, the girl, and her grandmother then walked over to inspect the capsule, soon accompanied by the other farmers who had been listening to the radio broadcast. As they helped him out of his protective suit, they began shouting his name in celebration. 2 days later, Gagarin was the centerpiece of a hero's welcome in Red Square, Moscow, which was broadcast on television all over Europe and later the rest of the world. Sadly, on March 27, 1968, his life would be cut short in a jet crash during a routine training flight. Gagarin was flying an MiG-15 jet, along with his instructor, Vladimir Seryogin. The jet crashed in the town of Novosilovo, not far from Moscow. The cause of the crash was uncertain and had become the subject of several theories. At least 3 investigations into the crash were conducted separately by the Air Force, official government commissions, and the KGB. The official findings reported that Gagarin and Seryogin had maneuvered to avoid colliding with a bird or other object, and as a result, entered a tailspin and plummeted to the ground. Alternatively, a study claims that Gagarin's death was caused by his panic reaction after realizing an air vent in his cockpit was open. He had allegedly threw his MiG-15 fighter jet into such a steep dive that he had blacked out and crashed into a forest below, killing himself and his co-pilot. After the crash, the Soviet government had declared a period of national mourning in memory of Gagarin. This would be the first time that the USSR would declare a period of mourning for anyone who was not head of state. And yet, despite the tragic end to his life, Yuri Gagarin would be remembered as a hero and the first person to venture into outer space, the one who would cause a chain reaction that would lead to some of humanity's greatest achievements.